Hi, everyone. It's Father Norm. As you can see, I got full use of my right and left arm. It was my right arm that had issues, and because I had total shoulder replacement, gosh, about 8 weeks ago now. It's good to be here. I have all kinds of mixed emotions going on inside of me, in part, probably in large part, because today is January 7th, the day after what happened, the unspeakable uh, reality in the United States Capitol yesterday. How to even describe that? Many people are making comments. It certainly was horrible. And as we look at that violence, we all need to step back and take a deeper look. Why is that going on? What gets people like that? Uh, where's all the anger coming from? And how can we, especially we who call ourselves Christian, but I know there's other faith traditions that also teach an ideal of nonviolent love. For us as Christians, when I think of our Jewish brothers and sisters too, often one of the first stories you hear, a Bible story as a child, is Cain killing his brother Abel out of jealousy from the very beginning, and that violence happening. And for those of us who come out of any faith tradition, but again, I'll speak to the Christian one, look at this. Jesus, we have this beautiful Christmas setting that we just had, and the infant baby and the manger, and how touching, and what a great story, and the people who reached out to him. But we all know, as I've mentioned here before, that he went from the crib to the cross. That same Jesus that people were cooing and seeing and being emotionally moved by as an adult, when he started out in his public ministry in his own hometown of Nazareth and talked about the Spirit of the Lord upon him to reach out to people, especially the poor and the vulnerable. Some of his own hometown were amazed by him and that he said that, and then some wanted to get rid of him. Who does he think he is? He's just Joseph's son, the carpenter's son. And he was being critical of them for not living their faith. And they tried to plot against him and throw him over a hill. He was just starting his ministry. Violence. How sad. And we know that we have a powerful example, whether you're Christian or not, in Jesus, because in his whole public ministry, he talked about the path of love is the path of the cross. And what he meant by that, the path of love is the path of self-sacrifice. The path of love is doing for others and seeking their good, their God-given good. And obviously, Jesus showing if we do that, it happened to him, that he was betrayed, he was taken to the cross, he was crucified. But think about this. Jesus was confronting violence. And it's very easy throughout history and even yesterday for some people. It's easy to, confront violence with violence. Well, you do this, this is what I'm going to do to you. You hate, I'm going to hate. That it's not the Bible quote, but whatever hateful thing you do to me, I'm going to do it right back and be resentful with contempt. Too often happening. And we know that Jesus, he said no. Even though they hated him, taking him to the cross, he still went out of love for the people who were doing that to him. He was a scapegoat. Too often in violence, people look for a scapegoat. Who can we blame? Who can we put down? Who can we get rid of? Especially because they're bothering us with their challenge of goodness. And Jesus took hate and returned it with love. And Jesus took going to the cross and all that awful things that were people were doing to him, and he returned it with forgiveness. Jesus reminds us in our own day that we all need to be strong about speaking out against and not getting caught up in violent attitudes and actions ourselves. Yes, yesterday so many people were violent. and for so many reasons. And in addition to, obviously, we have to hold people accountable when they do the kind of things they did in the Capitol. But yeah, what do we need to do here? Because we all know the last several months, last several years, and more than 4 years, even beyond, little by little, we have our differences. They're legitimate. Democracy is the coming together of differences to come up with best solutions. But too often our differences now, rather than helping us explore possibilities of what we can do together, become causes to be hostile and negative, and I don't want to have anything to do with you. And we see that played out in so many ways there. And I want to read something from Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., because he spoke powerfully against violence in his own day. And we know that this month we have a day dedicated to him. And actually, it should be more than a day as we look at what he did. And many of you, you've heard me say that when we talk about Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., lots of folks uh, just bring up Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., not the Reverend, but it was the Reverend. It was the nonviolent Christ. It was the merciful Christ in the midst of hate that influenced Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s life and his example. I was 21 when on a Thursday night, I remember I was at one of our faith meetings and we heard that he was killed. And how sad, how sad. Violence erupted, frustration. Again, everything is so sad because he spoke out against violence. At the same time, he wasn't against violence to be passive. Well, hey, now, whatever our situation, we just lay down our lives and we just let people run all over us. No, he talked about nonviolent resistance, nonviolent activism, nonviolent speaking out and confronting in many different ways. But again, nonviolent, done motivated by love, done motivated by trying to help people see what's good and what's best. I want to read this reflection, and I'll tell you, you can get it on on the computer. You can go to quotes for Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and put in there, Google it or however you do it, King's quotes on violence. This is a little bit long, and you can find this. Bear with me. I'd like to read it, and as I said, you may also want to get it yourself. This is something he said at that time. Then, think about it. 32, 52 years ago, 53 years ago. We need to hear it now. We needed to hear it thousands of years ago. We'll probably need it to hear thousands of years from now. He says this: violence never brings permanent peace. It solves no social problems. It merely creates new and more complicated ones. Violence is impractical because it is a descending spiral ending in destruction for all. It is immoral because it seeks to humiliate the opponent rather than win his understanding. It seeks to annihilate rather than convert. Violence is immoral because it thrives on hatred rather than love. It destroys community and makes brotherhood impossible. It leaves society in monologue rather than dialogue. Violence ends up defeating itself. It creates bitterness in the survivors and brutality in the destroyers. So powerful. Again, put his name in. You can get this quote, other quotes that he spoke about. Nonviolent love, active nonviolent love, because love is how do we engage one another. And again, when I use the example of Jesus, it's not necessarily love as just a warm feeling for what everybody's doing that's wrong. Jesus went to the cross. And again, he was showing that God ultimately is telling us that love is the greatest reality, the greatest power, more than hate. And he's showing us the courage to go forward and live the principles that are implanted in us by our Creator. And in doing that, we know as he went to the cross, I'm sure he didn't say, oh, all the people were spitting on him, putting him down, saying, crucify him. Oh, yes, all you people, I feel so warm toward you. Sorry you don't see me in the right way. I have these warm, loving feelings because love identified it as emotion. Yes, love can be an emotion. But that's not the heart of it, is gospel love. Jesus probably didn't have any warm, wonderful feelings as he was going to the cross. And yet, what he did have was an act of the will at the very core of his soul, at the core of his call from his heavenly Father to show love by showing people here goodness and seeking their goodness, seeking that somehow, some way, his example may convert people. His example may move people away from hate to goodness and love and understanding and kindness. We all need to look at that. Much more could be said. Just wanted to add these few comments today. You're hearing a lot, and like to hear from you if you want any thoughts you have. This is just one small piece of what we need to look at, especially any of us who see ourselves wanting to be good and loving people in the best sense, and for many of us as Christian or even those not, the powerful example of Jesus Christ. God bless you. Go in peace to show greater love.